A lot of your favorite games probably aren't as good as you remember them. Most people's favorite game is one they played as a kid or a teenager, and I guarantee you if you go back and play it, it will not live up to the expectation you had of it. Certain games do have this though. Take for example Skyrim, which even though the combat is not modern by any standards, it still has a great open world and an okay story. But, if your favorite game is a random indie game or something that was released specifically for the PS2 on September 13th for some reason, that game probably isn't as good as you remember. Maybe a Metal Gear Solid or something like that. Most of the games just aren't. But No One Can Make Me Hate You, Crash of the Titans. One of the best beat 'em ups that has ever exists and is definitely overhated. Everyone is blinded by nostalgia and it's very, very powerful. Some people will tell you that older games are better than newer games. And in some aspects they may be, but when people say stuff like that to me, all I can hear is some of the older people that swear that all these older cars are better than newer cars and that newer cars today just break apart and, there's reasons for that. When you're going 60 miles an hour in a metal box and you crash, you're probably gonna die. If you go 60 miles an hour and crash in a newer car, you have a chance of survival because the car breaks apart a little easier, not making you absorb all the force from the accident. And I feel like that's a very good comparison to when people say older games are better than newer games. There are aspects to both of these older things that are better than newer ones, like lots of older games didn't have microtransactions. That's a great thing. Also, lots of older games combat sucks. If you go back and play Skyrim is my best example. Skyrim's combat sucks if you go back and play it now. While I know there will be people in the comments or, people that just think to themselves, oh, Skyrim's combat is great, it still is good for today's day and age. You're either lying to yourself or do not have very high standards. And that's okay. It's okay to be nostalgic, but you have to notice it. Not only because you refuse to see great games and progression and technology that we've gotten, especially over the last decade, where we have realistic graphics and better art styles and definitely better gameplay along most games, better voice acting, better in a lot of aspects. While some are bad, it's just like the car example I said. If you're comparing everything to your rose-tinted glasses, nothing's gonna make you happy and nothing's gonna live up to the standards you have for games. But if you sit there and realize that nostalgia has blinded you at least a little bit, you may learn to appreciate these games a little bit more. Most of the games were clunky, had a bad story, or was just a bad game overall. Maybe the company just started, and that's fine. I have my own favorite games. As I said, Crash of the Titans. Love that game. I will defend that game to the day I die. But I feel like it becomes a problem when you compare new games to games that you haven't played in years, or it was one of the first games you played and you haven't played it since. Because it just honestly doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you're comparing a game from, 1999 to a game that was made in 2024. Some of them are still good, but I don't think they compare to today's games. Zelda Breath of the Wild, that's one of the best games of all time. And Zelda Ocarina of Time is a masterpiece that was great especially for the time that it was released. I would argue that Breath of the Wild is better than Ocarina of Time. I know it's a crime to even say that, but from the gameplay to the exploration to the technology to, how Nintendo has grown as a brand, I just don't see how you can say that Ocarina of Time is better than Breath of the Wild. And I think it has a lot to do with the nostalgia factor. While I still acknowledge it's a great game, I do not think that it is on the level of Breath of the Wild. But that aside, I think one of the bigger reasons that we need to acknowledge nostalgia is because companies get away with it and ride on the wave of it. There is no reason I'm paying full price for a game that came out in 2013 for updated graphics and, things like that. If it's your first time playing it, I can see that because playing the newer version is almost always better, but they were riding on that nostalgia wave. And when companies do stuff like that, I think it is really grimy. All this to say that games, especially for the time, were very good for the technology that they had, but I think it's important to acknowledge it and be aware that it can be very blinding, especially when comparing it to different forms of media or whatever it may be. That's all I got for today. Thanks for watching. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.